HP Malaysia has recently launched their brand new HP Spectre line of laptops, and what we have here today is the HP Spectre x360 convertible laptop. Now they do launch two different variants, 14-inch and 13-inch variant, and what we have here today is the 13-inch model. Even though they do call it 14-inch for that one, but because of the aspect ratio, it is 16:10. So the actual screen size of that particular model is 13.5 inch. Meanwhile, this 13-inch one, it is using 16:9 aspect ratio, and the actual screen real estate is about 13.3 inch. So in terms of the diagonal distance, the length itself is not that different, just by 0.2 inch. But because of the aspect ratio, the 14-inch variant will look slightly or more bigger compared to the 13-inch one. But hey, we don't have really the chance to test out the 14-inch, but nonetheless, the 13-inch do have some really interesting difference compared to the 14-inch one. And today I shall be sharing my experience after using this particular laptop for the past 2 weeks, ever since the Malaysia lockdown 2.0 started. Okay, first, when I take this laptop out of its packaging, I'm really impressed by its build quality. But however, before I get into the laptop itself, I must tell you, this is probably the most elegant charging adapter I have ever seen that comes together with a laptop. It has, well, paracord braided cable to it instead of the standard we call it rubber or plastic kind of cable. It is looking really nice, and it goes really well with this premium laptop design and everything. And which, speaking of the design, I have to give to the HP's designers for whatever they have done to design this laptop. They call this a gem cut design, which you can obviously see from these angled corners. These are CNC milled aluminum, and of course with this kind of a quirky, unconventional design, it's gonna cost a little bit, and that is gonna reflect in your final price tag. But in general, holding this entire laptop in your hands is feeling really nice and robust. I really like the overall finish on this laptop, especially with the sandblast finish. This is exactly, it is always better compared to those brush finish, because you won't get your oily stains on it, and even though it's there, but you can't really see because of the sandblasted finish. And on top of that, the overall laptop is very thin, to a point that they have to make some changes to the USB Type-A port over here. This kind of port is usually used on those RJ45 ports because, laptops are getting thinner, and now it is getting thinner to the point that the USB Type-A, they have to use this kind of spring-loaded mechanism to hide this port. If you ask me if this is necessary or not, I think yes, because USB Type-A is still very important, and they are still giving you one of them. I think it is a very good one. Now, speaking of the ports, on this left side, this corner here is the power button and a 3.5mm audio combo jack, USB Type-A port. Meanwhile, on the other side here, you got two Thunderbolt 4, which is USB Type-C as well, and a single micro SD card reader. Now, you might also notice there is a single switch over here. Now, this is what HP call as the physical kill switch for the webcam. What they have actually done here is basically wire a physical switch over here. So instead of having some sort of a blocking mechanism, this one, when you switch it off, that means your webcam is turned off directly. Now, as a convertible laptop, you do have 4 different modes of using this laptop. Number 1 is the traditional laptop mode. Number 2, you can use it as a tent mode. Number 3, cinema mode. And number 4, tablet mode. They also included these rubber spacers on the laptop panel Okay, number one is of course to prevent the screen from scratching with the keyboard and also serve as a rubber feet when you use it in cinema mode. Now for a 13-inch laptop, HP has maximized the usage of all the keyboard surface over here. Now for one thing is the keyboard feels really nice to type on. They have good travel distance and each of the keys feedback is really nice. But there is one thing I don't really like about this keyboard is the lack of function key lock. You know, when you lock, let's say you lock the function key, basically all your function row, you can use it from F1 to F12. So right now by default is all of these function keys that you can use it for the brightness control, volume control, and media controls and everything like that. Unfortunately, if you really want to switch it to like F1 to F12, you have to go into the BIOS to change it. And that means that you have to restart your machine while doing that. Now, given that this laptop has a 16:9 screen aspect ratio, there isn't much room for the trackpad. So the trackpad has to go slightly wider to give that extra space for your tracking purposes. But I think this is one of the better trackpads around because the palm rejection is good and the glass tracking surface is smooth for normal tracking and the gesture tracking. You do get a fingerprint scanner under the arrow cluster over here, and that is pretty much what you can use it for the Windows Hello authentication options, because the camera on this thing is not infrared camera, and yeah, unfortunately for a premium laptop of this price range, I expect it to include that option. I know not a lot of people has been using the camera hello login function for that. For the price I'm paying, I'm thinking they should add that into this laptop. Okay, moving on to the display. As I mentioned earlier, the display is 16:9 aspect ratio, and one thing I didn't really notice when I first got this laptop is the panel itself. HP is using OLED panel for the 13-inch variant of the x360. Now, I could understand why, because not many manufacturers are making 13.5-inch OLED panels. So probably that's the reason why the 14-inch variant only gets a standard IPS model instead of this one. The 13.3-inch has the OLED panel. Why I didn't notice at first is because of its brightness. Conventionally, OLED panels has slightly higher display brightness from there. Eventually, I did notice they are using OLED panel after checking through the hardware IDs and everything else. And the color vividness is really nice. And that is especially after we test it with our colorimeter, and it is showing us this panel has 99% sRGB color gamut coverage, and that is really amazing for this kind of laptop. So pretty much you can use it for all your casual video editing, photo editing, and even movie watching and stuff like that. Now, because of the use of this Gorilla Glass NBT glossy glass surface, it also contributes to the overall sharpness and the vividness of the color from the display. One thing I have to give credit to HP is their design of this hinge. Normally, when we use a touch-capable laptops like this, one really annoying thing is the wobbly display hinge over here. But this one, HP has reduced it to the point that I would say this is one of the rarest laptop with good hinge for a touch screen. So kudos to HP. And now for the specs, like I mentioned earlier, the one we have here is the Core i7 variant. This one has the 11th gen Intel Core i7 1165 G7 chip inside there. And it has 16 gigs of soldered on DDR4 memory. So unfortunately, you can't really change that. And that is what you get out of the box. As for the i5 variant, you do get 8 gigs of RAM, and that is what they are pairing for, 8 gigs for the i5 and 16 gigs for the i7. As for the storage, the one we have here has 1TB of NVMe SSD built into it. In terms of performance, well, if you previously has watched some of our test videos regarding this particular chip, I would say this is one of the most interesting chip for ultrabooks. Consider that Intel has upgraded their Intel Iris Xe graphics to a point that you can actually game on this kind of ultrabooks. So we have tested on two different games, Genshin Impact and as well as GTA 5. In Genshin Impact, we can reach about 40 frames on average. That is especially when we have already tuned all the game's settings to the highest possible. 40 over frames is pretty playable on that, and you can always turn it down if you want that 60 FPS experience. Meanwhile, for GTA 5 is especially great. Even we not using the highest graphical setting. At normal graphical setting, you can get about 50 over frames. That is a very, very impressive performance out of a ultrabook. And last but not least is of course the battery life. The built-in 60 Wh battery can last us for about 8 hours of normal usage. That is including the normal web browsing, video watching, and some light photo editing on this laptop. Although they claim to have more than 11 or 19 hours from that, I believe they are using the lowest screen brightness for that. And in terms of real life, everyone will have a different experience from here, so do take their claim as a grain of salt. So that brings us to the price of the HP Spectre x360 13. They do, like I mentioned earlier, they offer two variants for this model. The i5 model will come at 5,699 ringgit Malaysia. Meanwhile, this i7 model is going to cost you at 6,899 ringgit Malaysia. So that is about 1.2k of difference over there. Yeah, the price is gonna steep. i7, i5, the RAMs to increase, and of course the storage increase as well. So at 1.3k of difference, yeah, you are basically paying for the i7 chip, extra 8 gigs of RAM, and double the NVMe SSD storage. If you ask me, I would strongly suggest you to consider getting the i5 model because the performance difference is not going to be that big. Although missing out from the 16GB of RAM is quite a bummer, but I guess that is kind of stuff you have to pay. But then again, if you are willing to just go all out and get the best design, best performance out of everything, well, just go for the i7 model for that. So that's all I want to say and share about this HP Spectre x360 13. Do let us know what do you guys think about this laptop, and yeah, I'll see you guys in the next video.